You're tuning in to Neurodiversity, a podcast for neurodivergent adults and the people who love them. Please note that this podcast does not substitute medical or professional diagnosis and advice. Hey y'all, welcome back to Neurodiversity. It's me, Jasmine. All right, let's just jump right into it. So last episode, I defined autistic burnout for you and just told you a little bit, set up the story, set up the stage to talk about my experience with autistic burnout. So I talked about my year 2020 first, which I was not in autistic burnout at that time. Actually, personally, 2020 was a good year for me. So just to recap a little bit, the definition of autistic burnout, according to Dr. Dora Raymaker and colleagues, is a syndrome conceptualized as resulting from chronic life stress and a mismatch of expectations and abilities without adequate supports. It is characterized by pervasive, long-term, typically about 3 or more months, exhaustion, loss of function, and reduced tolerance to stimulus. All right, so from their clinical research, that is the definition that they gave. I'm going to just read you a couple of descriptions given by participants who are autistic from that same study, just in case you're like, what does that even mean, right? Which I will also explain specifically with me, like breaking it down, like my loss of function, reduced stress to tolerance, and obviously chronic fatigue. So one description from a participant reads, "I've had people say to me many times over the years, but why? Are you so tired? What have you been doing?" The brutal truth is that for an autistic person, simply existing in the world is knackering. Never mind trying to hold down a job or have any sort of social life. Many of the standard recommendations for improving mental health, that's in air quotes, such as seeing more people in real life, spending less time on the internet, sitting still, and being air quote calm, simply make matters worse. We need a lot of downtime in order to recover from what, for most folks, are the ordinary things of life. Another participant said, "Autistic burnout is a state of physical and mental fatigue, heightened stress, and diminished capacity to manage life skills, sensory input, and or social interactions, which comes from years of being severely overtaxed by the strain of trying to live up to demands that are out of sync with our needs." Excuse me. All right, yo, my voice is still struggling. I've been better, but still kind of sick for like a week now. All right, so those are some definitions, just to recap that. Again, with my year of 2020, so what I had been going through that year, like the pandemic, obviously, for me, that meant that I had to redesign my career and like move services to telehealth, which was really a blessing, honestly, but a labor of love. I started my own business, also therapy, but before I was contracting. Now I also started my own practice. I went through a breakup, followed a few months later by like a fallout with that same person. I just really like tapped into like my hobbies bag and like really started to figure out like what I like to do. It was like a year of self-discovery, a lot of self-healing, and got into my entrepreneurial bags. Like I said, I started a business, and then I prepared to do some marketing. Because I think in the last episode I told you that I was doing marketing, but I didn't in 2020. It wasn't until the end of the year that I had began to put that in motion, and then in 2021 is when I actually started to do the marketing. So I'm about to get into a little bit of that. But yeah, so 2020, like, I just felt like I had things to prove. I was out here just like air quote, like, hustling inside myself, if that makes any sense. And it was just like big Virgo, like legacy Beyonce vibes of like, I'm here to like figure me out and do shit and like, I don't know, just like live my best life, right? All right, so that was that. So let's move on to 2021. So with 2021, that in 2021, I finally like broke down and what I will call the Great Unmasking. But my burnout didn't really hit me until like towards the end of the year, like around July or August. So in the beginning of the year though, like I was struggling, like I was having a lot of fatigue with starting, as I moved into online marketing. And so like I started out with Instagram, like most people do. Again, I got big Virgo energy. So like I can be, I'm not always, but I can be like super thorough, and like I want to know the ins and outs and the details of everything before I act. Not always a plus. So I was like designing content, like organizing content, like launching content, and like trying to figure out how to strategically do that, like, you know, researching how to use like design apps and things like that. Just like reading like how to be successful at, you know, Instagram, social media marketing, and, you know, interacting with other clients, or not clients, but other people online, your peers and things like that. So I'm like taking all this in. I'm trying to execute that and do it like the right way, right? At the same time, I had about like, this was January, February, I had about like 18 to 25-ish clients I was seeing like on a weekly basis. And I was, by the end of February, I was done. I was depleted. So that really took a toll on me. And even during that time, I think like the burnout was kindling. It was creeping up, because like during that time, like I was melting down more, like crying more, and just like not able to, just really keep up with my life outside of work, like not functioning. I'm not keeping up with the paperwork that I need to keep up with. And then like, as the year kept progressing, you know, I was also doing like other social media stuff, like email campaigns, because like that's what the internet was like. Yeah, okay, you're on Instagram, you're on Twitter, but like, what if the servers go down? You need an email campaign. And I'm like digging into all of that, and it's like, you know, you need like these sequence of emails and magnet leads and like all of this stuff, right? And then I'm like, okay, well maybe too, like I could just do like a newsletter to keep people engaged. And so like, I'm doing all of this over like the first half of the year. At some point in there too, like I was like dating a little bit, or trying to. And like dating's hard for me. It really is. So that took up a lot of energy. Socializing a bit. I was still in my community organizing work, so I was still leading the task force at that time, and also on another community group, and like to lead that body of people, which was such an honor, and like I honestly killed it, but to do that was like, it was taxing, but like not in a bad way. It was just that like I needed a lot of time to like research what was going on, to like look at different cities and different models around anti-racism and like organizing that they have done. Like I needed to meditate and like really sit and see where I stood on certain issues, and like, you know, what my intentions were, you know, what I pulled from that stuff, how I could communicate it to others, you know. And so like it was just taking a lot of time, and like I couldn't even it got to the point where I just like wasn't even keeping up at my house anymore. Like it was always just like hella dishes and just so chaotic and things like that. And so if people who know me, you know that I'm like a messy person. I've gotten better. Just want to just put that out there. Like, I have gotten better at my organizational skills. I've been working hard over the last year. But like, I am like a messy person, but like, it was extreme. It was tough. It was a lot. Like, it was so bad to the fact that like one time when my sister and like her ex came over, I wasn't even home, but they had just popped up randomly, and like I guess he told her like something like I wasn't okay, like something was wrong with me, that my house looked like that, and he was right. He was definitely right. So yeah, I was doing that. So let's like kind of jump in like to closer to that, to the Great Unmasking, right? And just like I'm gonna take a pause. Like, I have anxiety a lot of times, or just feel self-conscious about telling stories, because like I'm honestly not a super great storyteller. There's a lot of moving parts to stories, and just like keeping up with people's names and times and putting in order and like climax and I punchlines, and I don't know, like I don't know, I'd be trying, but so bear with me if it doesn't come out in, you know, a very poetic form, but it is what it is. So come July, like I had just like kind of finished like setting up my email campaign and stuff, still seeing a bunch of clients, but like not as many as I was like earlier in the year. So I had titrated down a little bit. I was getting pumped. I was pumped. I was planning to, I was getting ready to go to my 30th birthday, like celebration. So I had planned to go to LA and Seattle for like the course, like about 2 weeks or whatever, to just like visit some friends and kick it and like celebrate turning 30, right? So I was pumped for that, and then suddenly like towards the middle of July, I was still pumped, but I had a lot of anxiety. Like I started getting so much anxiety around the trip, and like for multiple reasons. So, you know, part of it was just a lack of like clear communication on my part and like boundaries. Part of it's like my own difficulties with just executive functioning. Like planning a vacation is a lot of work. And so like I had some parts planned, but like not other parts really. So like, you know, I knew when I was going to Seattle, like I was gonna like stay with my friend Amanda for a while. My sister was gonna meet me. We were gonna like go to some tree houses. But like coming into Seattle, like, well, I didn't pay attention to like my flight, like got there at like midnight or something like that. And then I was like, well, what if there aren't lifts or whatever? I didn't really know how to navigate that. And then I was like, I just like realized like, well, damn, like if I get an Airbnb, like I'm gonna spend like all this money to stay there for what, like 5 hours or something like that. I wasn't feeling that. So then like eventually like I reached out to like my homeboy Eric, and hey Eric, and like yeah, he was like, well, he's like, you could stay with me, like blah 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 blah. But like we hadn't necessarily like planned it out, and then like I hadn't heard from him in a little while, and that really set me off like while I was on the vacation, and like I think contributed a lot to like me going home. But like I also wasn't I wasn't very vocal, like, you know, like it was kind of like I had this anxiety and like this self-consciousness of like being too much, and a lot of like neurodivergent people like carry that, and so like I didn't want to like press him if like he like was busy or like didn't want me to stay or like whatever, you know, where I could have just like called him and be like, yo, like I didn't hear back from you in my text, like what's up, like but that's not where I was at that point. So like that was some of the things like kind of causing me anxiety. I also had anxiety, like I was supposed to like kick it, you know what, I'm gonna talk about this person quite a lot, and I don't know if they want to be associated with the story publicly, so I'm going to give them a pseudonym. We'll call him Nikki. So like me and my homie Nikki, like we've been cool since I don't know, like 10th grade. So but we hadn't like we got we hadn't talked in a few years, and several years due to a falling out, but like we had like got back to talking like in 2021 or whatever, and then like now here I was like coming out to LA, I was gonna visit, whatever, and like I was just like unsure about like just the nature of the relationship, and like I'm not a go with the flow kind of person. I'm not like, and so like, but I also like at that time was ignoring my own boundaries, like being honest about that, and like, you know, calling out shit that I didn't like in the moment, instead of trying to be like cool and like, you know, like all this hot girl rhetoric and like you're not stressing and like so I was just like setting myself up for failure there. So then like I had like some anxiety about that and just like asking for like simple favors from him, which he like offered anyway in the end, but like I like wanted to know sooner. So that was like giving me anxiety. Like I had so much anxiety like around routines. Like all of a sudden I was just like, I don't have any like routines or systems in my life, and like I'm trying to pack. Oh, also like, yeah, things I ordered didn't get shipped in time, anxiety. And like I was just like, well, like what's my makeup routine? Like what makeup should I pack? Like I don't even know like, you know, where to begin really. And I felt like I had to just like kind of like invent myself like in the moment or something like that, if that makes sense. Like I couldn't function. Like I wasn't able to like function normally. Like, I mean, I'm not a routine person. I like routines. I need routines, but like because I have ADHD, I have trouble executing those routines or like setting them up for myself. Again, getting better with that. So yeah, like, I was, like, stressed out about that. Like, I was, like, stressed out about, like, not having a specific, like, fashion style all of a sudden. In fairness, like, I had been in the house, like, for, like, a year. I don't know. Like, I guess I forgot how to get dressed. So, like, I was on one already before I went. But, you know, I took it in stride. I was like, whatever, it's gonna be fine. Like, you know, I went out there. And so, like, Nikki... I met up with Nikki first. Like, that was the first person I saw on my vacation or whatever. And, like, we were, like, kicking it, having a good time. And, like, I just slowly, all over the course of, like, 36 hours, like, built up so much, like, just, like, overwhelm that I essentially, like, had a panic attack. So, like... I just kind of started with just, like, little things. I know these things are, like, so silly and, like, or they may sound silly, right? But, like, Nikki doesn't like shoes in his house, like, which is something I wasn't used to, because, like, I didn't care about that at my last apartment or whatever, and, like, I kept forgetting to take my shoes off, and, like, I just felt like such a fuck up, like, I, like, was just, like, struggling to follow, like, a number of, like, the stories he was telling me about his life, and, like, I was interested, and, like, I cared, but, like, I couldn't keep up, and some of it was just, like, because of, like, changing, not necessarily changing stories, but, like, one of the ways my brain works is, like, I really need to, like, understand a lot of details to, like, make it make sense. So, like, you might say, like, oh, like, so-and-so was mad, but, like, I don't really, like, know why, then I might not be as engaged in the story, or, like, I don't necessarily have, like, a personal stake in it, if that makes sense. And, like, you know, when you have conversations with people, especially people that you're close to, like, you want to, what's the word I'm looking for, like, you're just, like, be engaged, and, like, you know, maybe you have an opinion, or, you know, you want there to be some, like, understanding. That's what it is, understanding. And a lot of times, like, without certain details, it's hard for me to cultivate that understanding and, like, really have anything to say back. So then I'm probably just gonna be like, oh, okay, like, cool. So, like, things like that, or just, like, I'm a very, very, visual, like, learner, and I process information very visually. And I'm gonna get into all of that. Even, like, the way I think is in pictures. Oftentimes, I don't really think in, like, words or anything like that. And so, like, you know, he was telling me things that, like, had to do with, like, geographical locations. And, like, I guess that was, like, a really big deal because, like, he was, like, telling me, like, things that was going on for him at work. And, like, I couldn't, like, put it all together and then, like, be excited or, like, happy for him, I feel like, in, like, a way that I typically would if I understood. But, like, I didn't understand because, like, I couldn't envision, like, these regions or, like, what he was talking about. I didn't get it. And I didn't feel comfortable saying that out loud and it being like, hey, I need more clarification. And, like, you might be like, well, why? Like, and part of it is just because, well, one, I feel like, well, I know that people expect me in general to function or be a way that I'm not naturally. And that's something that is clear to me. And, you know, coming again to masking, which I didn't know I was doing at the time. I think I was just, like, saving face a little bit. I also wasn't very aware. So it takes me a good amount of time to process things in general. But especially emotions, something that neurodiverse people or neurodivergent people often experience is what's called alexithymia. And so that's a difficulty with kind of pinpointing your emotions or, like, knowing what you're feeling. Now, I'll say that I have a lot of emotional intelligence, but I need time to, like, understand or, like, identify what the emotions are. And a lot of times in that time, I end up shutting down. And, like, I may shut down or just kind of retreat and, like, you know, focus on something else. And so I think that's a lot of what was happening there for me. But yeah, and so, like, that was happening. Like, I'm notorious at being terrible at painting my nails. I'm a shitty nail painter. I know this about myself. It's really not a skill that anyone needs to have. Like, but, like, I decided I was gonna paint my nails for whatever reason, and, like, I kept fucking it up and, like, taking it off. And he, like, teased me about it, and I was, like, super self-conscious, and, like, my RSD was kicking in. Rejection sensitive dysphoria. We'll get into that. So if you're like, man, Jazz, like, you're talking about a lot of things, a lot of terms, like, I've never even heard of. I know. Like, I'm gonna get into them as the podcast continues. But I really wanted to start with the story of burnout because I really want people to understand how this impacts people's lives, neurodivergent folks' lives, in a very real way. So yeah, I was super sensitive to that rejection, or perceived rejection. So it's not even always actual rejection. Like, you might perceive something to be rejection. So I kind of felt rejected. Other things I kind of felt rejected, like Nikki hates Steven Universe. I love Steven Universe. I'm like, okay, like, it's just a cartoon. And it is literally just a cartoon. It's not even that big of a deal. But, like, for me, Steven Universe, it represents, or, like, it embodies a lot of values that I hold personally. And I think it's a phenomenal show to teach children about emotional intelligence, to teach healthy boundaries and communication and relationships. And it's also super cute, just, like, aesthetically. But yeah, so, like, I think, like, subconsciously, in hindsight, again, I didn't know this at the time, but, like, in hindsight, like, it felt a little bit like he didn't like me, or, like, you know, like, my values, or, like, something like that. And the same thing around astrology. So, like, I'm super into astrology. You know, at this point, like, I had been into it for about a year. Like, it was heavy on my mind, like, things I wanted to, like, just talk about or whatever. And that wasn't really received. And, like, so much so to I felt like I couldn't even talk about it. You know, like, people talk about things and we're not always like, oh my God, I love it too. But then, you know, we just listen, whatever. But, like, it was a kind of like, oh, let's shut this conversation down. And so, like, I, again, kind of felt, rejected, right? And also just being a person who, who has restrictive interests, that was like a big part of like what I envisioned in the vacation of like things I might talk about, right? And that's something that I do often, is like I create like these stories of like how a social situation might go. And if you're like, if you work with neurodivergent people or kids with autism, you're probably like, oh, so you create your own social stories? I do. I didn't realize that before, but I do. But the thing is, because I create them myself, they're often wrong. So how I think a social situation might go and how majority of people would probably think it would go often doesn't line up. So yeah, like I was just kind of already like out of sorts, like dysregulated about that. I was also like just very upset about like my suitcase and like my packing, because like the suitcase I wanted didn't come in, and like I had all this stuff in the suitcase, and it was like falling out and everywhere, and I couldn't manage, and it was hard to find things because I'm so visual, and if I don't see it, it doesn't exist. And then I didn't want to leave everything all over the floor because I didn't want to look like a messy slob, even though, you know, if the shoe fits. I was not ready to wear it though. So like there was all these things going on inside of me, like very internally. And you know, the first day we like hung out, like we went out to Malibu, and like we were driving back away from Malibu, whatever. We were driving on the PCH, and like I was like, oh, I want to play music. So that was like one of like the social stories I had created for myself. So I made all these playlists like for the trip, and I was like, yeah, like this is a great time, I'm gonna play this playlist. So I like wanted to connect my phone to the car, and then like he couldn't because he was driving, and you can't connect the phone while you drive. So excuse me. So like he gave me his phone to play music, and I'm like, oh, problem solved, right? No. The thing is that playlists are so helpful for me because I don't keep a lot of like names of people and songs in my head. So then I didn't really know what music I wanted to play. Like I knew I wanted to play that playlist, but I didn't know what music I wanted to play. And then like so I was like stressed about that because like now I wasn't going to be able to play my playlist. And then like on the spot, I'm just like, well, what random song do I pick? Like, I don't know. I mean, I chose one, but like it took me a while. And like even finding like his music app on his phone like set me off a little bit because like I'm not technologically savvy, and I have some fine motor issues and like spatial reasoning issues and things like that. And so like I couldn't find it. I'm like, where do you keep it on your phone? And so he's like, just search it. And I'm just like, oh damn, like yeah, I should have just searched it. And I'm like, oh my god, I'm so dumb. So I'm like having this like internal narrative in my head about that, and I'm just like so in my head about all this stuff, like I'm not even like enjoying the PCH. And like this beautiful view on the side of me, and he's like, this would be like a really like nice picture, like video. I'm like, oh yeah. It would be, but like I'm not even present enough to like to do that or like think of that on my own. So it's just like super in myself, super wrapped up. I feel like there might have been a couple of other points. Okay, so yeah, so then we're like day two, it's morning time. And, like, we had been up for, like, a few hours, like, not doing much of anything, which I'm totally okay with. So I have a few modes. So, like, my, like, default modes are sit and, like, think about theories and past events and possibly future events or ideas. Sit and hyper-focus on research around, like, theories or something that I want to do or buy or, like, art or whatever. Or like be up and like very physically active. Like those are my modes. Those are usually like I'm in one of those three modes. But the thing about like being up and like being active is that while I suck at implementing routines, I am a creature of routine. So like if I'm at home, I'm typically gonna like just kind of be up and do the same sorts of things in the morning. If I'm at someone else's house, I don't know where to begin. And unless like I already like had a plan and like I scheduled it, right, and I wrote it out of like what I'm gonna do in the morning, which I did not do, because like you're on vacation and like, you know, on vacations you don't have plans, right, or allegedly, but like I need to. So like we're just kind of up, and like I'm just like not really moving because I struggle to initiate tasks, and I'm just kind of like daddling around. And he's like working, but then I think he's like actually kind of waiting on me, but I didn't know that at the time. So like, so then like eventually I figured it out. I'm like, okay, I'm like getting dressed, but then I didn't really like understand the plan for the day, and I took way longer to get dressed than like necessary because we was just going to the store to buy me a toothbrush that I forgot because, you know, packing, I forget things. So like that's going on, and like I am just like, while I'm getting ready, just this overwhelm is building. One, because I think I didn't realize that like maybe he was waiting on me to like kind of get started or start our day. Like two, like again, like the packing situation and like the clothes, like very overwhelming. And like at this point, like I'm getting a bit like hyposensitive to sensory input. So I can fluctuate between like hyper and hyposensitive. So hyper is like you're very sensitive to input, and like, you know, things might sound really loud or feel really intense when they are, you know, not like that for most other people. Hypo is the opposite of where you don't feel as much. So like I think I like broke a pair of glasses because I was like sitting on my glasses and like I couldn't feel them. So I was like embarrassed about that. He's like, you don't feel that like underneath you? And like I didn't. And then I think like it might have been that day or the day before, I don't know. Like we had like conversations. It was just like about our way of life, and like, you know, I don't have any official like documentation or brain scans, but I feel like it's pretty safe to say that Nikki's a very neurotypical person. And so like it was just like a stark contrast for me of like, oh, we think very differently. Like even just of like how to start the day, and like his day is like very like millionaire, start your hardest task and get up at 6 a.m. I don't know if that's all true. I'm embellishing. but like I'm like, okay, like actually like I like to just like get up and clean first, and usually like gets me in a better mood or whatever. Either that or like exercise, but it just depends on the day. But like he was like, oh, clean, like he was like, yeah, so you just start your day with like the easiest thing, which the answer to that is yes, which I'll get into more again in the future. But starting with easier tasks for people with like ADHD and other conditions is actually a really helpful strategy, because you build up dopamine and you build up momentum, versus like starting with your hardest tasks. You can then just get overwhelmed and shut down, and then like you probably don't even finish your hardest task or any other task. So he was like, yeah, you just started like the easiest task or whatever. And I was like, I don't think cleaning is easy. He's like, you just wipe stuff down. And so like I'm just like embarrassed because like a lot of cleaning has lots of steps, like laundry, lots of steps. Just like, yeah, cleaning things in different areas of your home. Like you got to go get supplies. You might have to let things sit. You have to come back and wipe them down. Then maybe you have to rinse, or like whatever. Like a lot of times in cleaning, like there are multiple steps to get things clean. So as someone who has trouble following multi-step directions or staying focused with multi-step tasks, that can be really difficult for me. But I will say that cleaning is relaxing, and oftentimes, unless I'm like trying to impress somebody and I'm rushing or whatever, depending on my intention, cleaning is relaxing. So it's a great way to start my day. But like, you know, I'm just feeling down about that, feeling bad about that. We go get this toothbrush, right? We're having some conversations, and like I can't like answer some of the questions because I can't picture some of the things in my head to like answer the questions, and like I'm feeling dumb, and like I feel I'm trying to figure out what to talk about, but I'm just increasingly building up with angst. And also like before we got in the car too, I think on the way like I mentioned that like I was feeling overwhelmed, and so like he said to me, he's just kind of like, overwhelmed about what? And like I was just like, yeah, why am I overwhelmed? there's no reason for me to be overwhelmed, because, you know, I think I'm a neurotypical person, like, you know, and there's no objective reason for me to, like, be overwhelmed right now. And so I'm just like, oh my God, like, I'm ruining this, like, I'm ruining the vacation, like, all of this stuff going on. Trying to, like, stuff the overwhelm down, but, you know, when you try to stuff things away, they get bigger and bigger, and they grow. And so, like, we get to the store, which was, like, the Amazon store, by the way. Like, I was like, one of the places I really wanted to go. I'm such a nerd, but, like, I really wanted to get to the Amazon store, because I definitely thought it was going to be, like, way more futuristic. Like, I thought it was about to be, like, some iRobot type shit, but it's a regular-ass grocery store with, like, some smart carts. Anyway, like, we get there, I'm having a hard time talking, I'm having a hard time just, like, making any kind of conversation. My mannerisms are becoming, like, increasingly odd, I would say, and just kind of, like, my walking patterns are, like, taking space, because one thing about, autism in general is that autistic people need time and space, so, like, literal time and space to calm down most of the time. And so, like, I'm starting to, I think, need that space, and I'm getting, like, even more, I feel like repulsed is a strong word, but I'm gonna go with it, because, I don't know, more repulsed by touch. So I'm not a touchy person in general, but, you know, I can touch my friends, you know, I can be closer to my friends, but, like, people, when I am in a state of distress, I don't like to be touched, unless, like, we have, like, a very intimate relationship. Like, I can really only name, like, one person, like, at the time, which is my sister, who would probably be, like, I would be okay, like, with, like, touch if I'm, like, truly decompensating. So, yeah, like, that's happening. And then, like, we get the toothbrush, we go to get water, he goes to the bathroom, I buy us some waters, but, like, in that time, that's when the panic, like, really started to hit me. Like, I couldn't breathe, my breathing was really shallow, my vision was, like, blurry, like, I couldn't see that well, and, you know, like, I go to check out, and I'm, like, putting my card in the card reader all wrong, and, like, and I'm, like, frantically trying to, like, find my best friend's number. I'm calling up my girl, I'm like, Tasia, like, I was like, are you home? Like, and I don't even know if I'm using full sentences at this point. She's like, what's wrong? I'm like, nothing, I'm just coming over. Like, just coming over. I'm coming over now. It's like, that happened. He's back, and I'm just, like, silent and, like a stone, and, like, he buys water. And, like, I'm just standing there. And, like, we go out to leave or whatever. And he tells me some stuff, whatever. We get to the car. I'm like, oh, like, I bought you this water. And he just looked at me, and he's just like, but, like, why did you just, like, sit there and let me buy water? And, like, I was just, like, I just looked, and I looked down, and I saw he had vitamin water. And I was like, but could you want vitamin water? Like, yeah, I thought you wanted vitamin water. And so he just, like, looks at me, and he's just like, okay, that was sweet, I'll drink it later. And then too. But obviously, like, I could tell, like, I mean, I don't know what his exact emotion was, but I certainly know that it was, like, not amusement. It was not amusement, it was not, like, joy, like, it was just like, what the fuck is going on right now? And so, like, you know, I can notice all of these things, even though I can't, like, necessarily control what's happening. So again, I'm just, like, embarrassed, and, like, I don't know how to say, like, oh, I didn't say anything to you because I didn't notice you were buying water, because I was dissociating from my body. I didn't know how to say that. And I also feel like I didn't know, as we had just kind of, like, started to rekindle our friendship and whatnot, like, I didn't know if it was a safe space to even say that. I also didn't necessarily connect that I was having a panic attack at the time, despite being a therapist, but, like, you know, when you are in crisis, your smart brain, your prefrontal cortex, it goes offline. It's really hard to make rational, helpful decisions, and that's why you practice a lot of that when you're calm. So, yeah, that's happening. I'm like, yo, I gotta go. I gotta go to my homegirl's house. Like, can you drop me off, like, or whatever? And so, like, he was really shocked, and like, he was just like, whoa, like, now, like, because we were supposed to go get food and like keep hanging out that day, and like, I was like, nah, like, I gotta go, and like, he was just like, oh, like, I was having like a good time, and like, I was actually really shocked to hear that. I didn't know, and so like that's part of like, you know, rejection, like sensitive dysphoria, and things. It's like you can just like interpret things around you a bit different than they're happening, or even I can sometimes interpret people's feelings. So I'm typically like pretty spot on in general, especially if they're bigger emotions, but I'm pretty close in that vicinity. Like I don't know what's going on in people's heads at the end of the day, and like I can misread things, or I can be hypersensitive and think like if someone has a pensive face that they're actually angry when they're just like thinking or whatever. I don't know. So that was the first part of the Great Unmasking. Um, so I'm hopping on postscript. I cut it off a little choppy there. But it is what it is. You know what? There's editors for that. When I get a budget for editors, they'll edit the shit out of it. It'll be great. Anyway, I don't want the episodes to be too long, so I am going to go ahead and just kind of leave it there. I wanted to just say real quick too. So like all of these things were happening, all of these, I don't know, just various like little things throughout the day. I guess you could kind of think of them like as microaggressions, right? You know, like the first time like someone's like, you're pretty for a black girl, you're like, okay, weird, whatever, you know, but like the 99th time you're like, fuck everybody. And then also like maybe like internalizing that too, like, well, like, am I even pretty? Are black women even pretty? So thinking about it kind of like in that context of like that snowball effect. And also I kind of like, obviously I didn't like share everything about my trip because like my objective isn't like to tell people's business. Like I'm telling my experience, and that's gonna involve other people for sure. But I still want to be just respectful of people's privacy. But like what I'll say in some is just like, I feel like a major trigger for me during that trip was noticing. I'm like scared to say this because I'm like, you're gonna sound like a fucking hater. And like really, I swear to God, like I am not hating. I'm actually very happy for all of my friends and people's success. But spending time with him, I really like notice, you know, I craved the same sort of like stability and luxury, or even just like, and like and I don't mean just like financially, but like also just like a calm presence, but and also just like confidence, just like confidence. And those are things that like I crave and like have been trying to create for myself. And so I think kind of seeing that and seeing where I was really struggling to create those realities in my own life, just unleashed a lot of insecurity and like feelings of inferiority. And so yeah, that's real shit, because we're real humans, and that's some shit I was going through. And I'm proud to say I'm making progress and living and learning and all that good stuff. All right, episode 2, I'll tell you about the second part of my LA trip and the Great Unmasking, and then we'll go from there. See you next time.